to ensure absolute loyalty. Prince Vlad employed a terror tactic he witnessed as a boy in Adrianople: impalement.
The classic way of impaling is to take the victim, put them spread eagle on the ground, tie the arms to one set of horses and the legs to another. Then you take a stake. What happens is the horses move slowly forwards, then the ropes are cut, and then you're hoisted up on this stake or pole. You die very slowly, not from your innards being pierced, but from exposure to the elements generally. Purpose, a lasting example of what can happen to you if you disobey the rules. It's effective.
With his ancestral throne secure, Vlad would restructure the social hierarchy and install a strict moral code that would result in the slaughter of thousands of his own people. Having established himself as sole sovereign, and with his court cleansed of disloyal noblemen, Vlad turned to restructuring the gentry to create a new nobility, loyal only to him.
He got rid of most of the old gentry. There's a noticeable drop in the old families during his reign. What did he do? He replaced them with lower gentry, who'd be beholden to him and more loyal, more trustworthy. And those are the ones he used to carry out his terror tactics of impalement.
With his henchmen in place, Vlad's obsession with loyalty and control led him to install a severe moral code, punishable only by death.
He was an extreme law and order man, and all the chronicles testify that during his lifetime there was law and order in Wallachia. He would punish you by impalement for little offenses as well as big ones. If a woman committed adultery, he had her body skinned and then exposed on the village square as a lesson to adulterous wives. Or if a woman was lazy, he'd have her hands cut off and impaled on the village square as a lesson to lazy wives. And he impaled the old people and the children because they were useless.
Naturally, the fear of his wrath kept rebellion down to a minimum. According to peasant tradition, Vlad placed a priceless gold cup in every village square for all the peasantry to admire. Many drank from it, but no one dared steal it. The cup remained in the square throughout Vlad's entire reign as a symbol of his absolute power.
What he wanted to do was to establish the fact that he was the absolute ruler, and what better absolute ruler is it than to be godlike? That's what it's all about. God has the power of life and death, and it's indiscriminate, let's face it. That's the essence of terror.
Before long, execution was not only administered as a punishment, but became the prince's favorite pastime. Vlad would kill at a whim.
Vlad liked to dine amid his impaled victims in his local city, and the stench must have been unbearable throughout the place. He would have the blood gathered in bowls in front of him, and he took bread, dipped it in the blood of his victims, and slurped it down. In fact, one case, a Polish nobleman held his nose. He was there, you know, having dinner with Vlad. And Vlad turned to him and said, "What's the matter with you?" And the fellow said, "My lord, I can't stand the stench of these rotting corpses all around." He said, "Very well, I'll take care of that." And then he had this fellow impaled on a higher stake than the others, and he said, well, now he's up there where the gentle breezes blow, and he doesn't have to worry about the stench down here anymore.
People always gathered to watch public executions, so when he did that, he had it refined to a point of perfection.
This perverted approach to law and order took the lives of thousands of his fellow Christian citizens and turned the royal capital into a stinking graveyard.
Vlad's palace at Tepes was surrounded by a high hedge 3 miles in length. There was a corpse hanging from every branch, and as soon as somebody came and cut down a corpse, a fresh corpse was put there in its place. And that is one of the reasons why, indeed, in Turkish, Vlad has the title Kazakçı Vlad, or Vlad the Impaler.
Vlad was an Orthodox Christian with a growing reputation as a sadist and a monstrous appetite for revenge. But as long as he fought against the Ottoman Turks, he was accepted in the Catholic center of Christendom.
Vlad Dracula was the one who fought and tried to stop the spread of Islam into his own area. And he was supported by the Pope. The Orthodox signed with the Catholics and they formed one church on paper, which shows you that the theological differences were peanuts. It didn't mean anything to the Pope. This guy was Orthodox Christian. Who cares? He's fighting the Turks.
In 1462, the Sultan Mehmed was on the warpath. The Wallachian border was lined with Vlad and his army, determined to keep the Turkish enemy out.
Mehmed's army was much bigger than Vlad's and much better equipped with cannon and a huge amount of cavalry. The first obstacle that he encountered was, of course, the river Danube, with Vlad drawn up on the northern bank, just ready to chop his army to pieces as it scrambled up the banks. They advanced slowly and drove Vlad back using their guns. They lost 250 men in this operation.
The Sultan sent 2 ambassadors to see Vlad, to negotiate possible settlement. Vlad asked them to remove their caps in his presence, and they said, "Lord, it is our custom never to bare our heads to any person." He said, "Very well, I will confirm you in your custom." So he had his soldiers come out and they took very small nails and they nailed these caps to the heads of these ambassadors. And then Vlad said, "When you come to visit a great ruler such as myself, you better go along with my customs. Go back and tell the Sultan what you have seen." And they did. And the Sultan was enraged and wanted vengeance.
With an army 3 times the size of Vlad's, the Sultan advanced and forced Vlad into retreat.
Vlad wheeled his forces around, started destroying everything in his path, marched across the Danube and destroyed villages on both sides of the Danube, which means he destroyed his own Romanian villages too.
Vlad burned food stores and poisoned wells to slow the invading army.
Scorched earth. Brilliant policy. Very cruel, but they say an army travels on his stomach. This was especially true in the 15th century. They lived off the land. Well, if you create scorched earth, there's no food around.
Vlad the Impaler raced back to the capital and with sadistic delight watched the invading army approach.
A first wave of Turkish came through, crossed the border, and came into Romania. He won that battle, took all the corpses and the wounded and the prisoners, and had a whole forest of sticks brought up in this big open field. And when the second wave came with the main army, they just stopped dead on their tracks. And so this forest of bleeding, agonizing bodies on sticks, and it was just a huge forest of dead bodies.
20,000, over 23,000 some odd. It was a deliberate attempt to frighten the Sultan. And when the Sultan saw this, he said, "What can you do against a man who does such terrible things?"
It was just so barbarous, so atrocious that even for them, they couldn't stand it. They just turned around and fled.
His brother Radu was the only man ambitious enough to cross this barricade of death and follow the Impaler Prince all the way to his mountain retreat.